ever met a person who had a ton of capital available and was deploying that capital, but still seemed to be struggling? And you're just like, how though? Like, you have all this money. Like, why is it not working out for you? This video is about why some people struggle even when they have the funds, right? We're going to talk about how the amount of money you have doesn't necessarily correlate to your level of readiness to be in this private money lending space. We're going to talk about the principle of discipline over the amount of capital that you have. And then we'll talk about employing systems as opposed to operating off of impulse or operating off of vibes, right? So first, having the funds for private money lending does not guarantee your success. In fact, it has very little role in how you're going to do. A lot of it is very much about your preparation. Okay. So I've worked with people who had $5,000 to lend, and I've worked with people who have $500,000 to lend. And there's not really a pattern I'm seeing in terms of the amount of capital that they're starting with to determine how ready they are to be a private money lender or how successful they are as a private money lender. What I'm actually seeing is that people who have certain systems, processes, and mindsets do better than other people. People who take it more seriously as a business tend to do better than people who don't. Okay. So educating yourself, but also using that education, right? I can give you an example of I had a student who started off with $5,000 and I had a student who started off with $500,000. These are real people. They were actually doing the same program around the same time, invested the same amount of money in their education, even though they had different starting points in terms of how much they were able to lend. One person was very official in their setup, right? They followed instructions that we talked about. They set up their business. They were at the office hours asking the questions, contacting me, working on their documents, seeking my feedback, really just all in. And this is the person who only had $5,000 to lend to start, okay? And it may be a thing where because they have a smaller amount of money, they're much more diligent with that amount of money because they're probably really thinking like, if I mess this up, it's over, okay? Whereas maybe the person with more money felt like they have more room. I don't know. I didn't really get into the psychology of it. But the person with 5,000 set everything up, was very intentional about seeking borrowers, and this person went above and beyond, hired an attorney in their state to make sure their documents were solid for what they were trying to do, and ended up doing their first loan. Now, and it's going well. It's not in, the loan has not been fully paid back yet, but they're in the loan right now. Same time, other student, $500,000 available to lend, same education, same opportunities. You could have came to office hours, you could have set up your documents, whatever. Did not seem to take it as seriously as the person with the $5,000 to start. And the interesting thing is this person actually did enter loans, but those loans are not doing as well. Now, let me tell you why. First of all, there were some core personality challenges that I think caused this person to enter into these loans in the first place, right? Because with a lot of these transactions, you will see red flags up front, right? It's very rare that everything looks perfect up front and then there's all these problems later. It's typically just like in a relationship. Like there's red flags you see and it's up to you to decide, is it a red flag and what am I going to do about it? Okay. And so this person did some loans and tons of red flags.
Oh, God.
And the loans are having problems, right? And now they're facing a situation where they can lose all the money in these loans. And it's more than one loan. It's two loans, but because of that struggle with setting boundaries, enforcing their rights, that self-advocacy, this person is struggling to enforce their rights and get their borrowers to repay. And you may be wondering like, why would that be an issue when they could just threaten like foreclosure? That's another thing, like failure to follow instructions, failure to actually take that extra step and have that awkward conversation of, hey, I'm working with a title company, we're going to place a lien on this property. The inability to have that conversation has led to problems, right? Even though they have more money. And that's the point. Like you can come in with whatever amount of money, but if you don't do the work and you don't, and I don't mean just the lending work, I mean the internal work. There's some internal work required, right? Like, do I feel comfortable advocating for myself, right? Or hiring someone to advocate for me? Like that's the internal work that was missing between these two people. Now, one person had it, but they had way less money. The other person had it, but the person with the less money stands to gain more than the person that started with more. And that's simply because of who they were, when they started and the work they did to prepare for this process. And so more money does not necessarily equal more readiness. Okay, keep that in mind. You have the power to make yourself ready and able to run this business like a real business and to protect yourself and advocate for yourself so that you can actually make profits, right? That's the whole point. But you have to prepare yourself for that. Now, discipline over amount of money, right? That's really what this comes down to as well, right? Not just having the personality, but do I actually have the disciplinary skills to follow the instructions that I was given, right, in running my business, and putting my emotions aside or putting my discomfort aside to actually do what I need to do so that I can enforce my rights when the time comes. That's the discipline piece, okay? And then systems. What systems have I put in place to make sure that if this person decides to screw me over, I'm going to be good, right? Have I put systems in place? If not, why, right? Do I think that it's just not going to happen to me? People think like this. They won't say it, but people think like, that's unlikely. Just because something is unlikely doesn't make it impossible, okay? And you never know, right? You just never know. And so it's better to have the system to protect yourself than to just be operating off of impulse and being reactionary if something actually does happen, okay? So this is why even with people who have a ton of money when they start private money lending, this is why they can still struggle in this business. You know, they may think they can take on more risk because they have more money and that's their prerogative to do, but you still have to do the work, right? The amount of money isn't going to change how much due diligence you have to do. It ain't going to change the documents that you need to have in place. All that needs to happen regardless.